This is the captain of the Enterprise. Ship.
Podcasting, the final frontier. These are the ridiculous introductions I am forced to read at gunpoint, or should I say phaser point.
Ship.
Welcome to Ship, yet another in the long line of tedious Star Trek podcasts. This show is hosted by David Lawler and David B. Anderson. The two Davids will take you on a journey through time and space every 3 or 4 weeks, boldly podcasting where no podcast has gone before. Seriously? This is what you're making me read? Take it away, boys.
This is episode 2 of Ship, a Star Trek podcast with your host. I'm David Lawler, and I'm speaking with David Anderson. How are you, David?
I am well.
Fascinating.
You are well. You always say that. Yeah, I think you said that before.
I am. I'm always well. I'm usually okay.
You're always like, I am well. I'm well.
I'm ready to do that. I'm actually kind of waving at the webcam I'm going through, and
Yes, you actually
like,
are.
Hello.
That's a drink, Jim.
Hello. Well, this episode is going to be about Romulans.
Yes.
The title of the episode is Beware Romulans Bearing Gifts, which is a line from Star Trek II. And today we'll be discussing the episode's balance of terror and the Enterprise incident.
Number 1 on our list of things to do.
So this is perhaps an indication of what is known as the Mandela Effect. That is a collective misremembering of a fact or event. The Romulans, genetically distant, not to mention emotional relatives of Mr. Spock's Vulcan race, complete with pointed ears, were introduced before the more popular enemies of the Federation, the Klingons. Balance of Terror was the 7th episode produced, aired in December of 1966. The 14th episode aired because of the visual effects, the model of the Romulan bird of prey warship designed by Wah Chung, and the complex for the time animated effects that they had.
Yeah, which, by the way, the version I watched was an already kind of re-digital, cleaned up version of that. So
You watched the remastered version?
Yeah, I watched it on Netflix. Yeah.
And I had a question about that. You think it's possible that the old original broadcast episodes are no longer in circulation? You think they were taken out?
You know, I haven't gone to the trouble to actually try to find out if you can get the original versions. I would think that you could.
Well, they're available in the Blu-ray set if you get because I have the Blu-ray box sets of season 3 anyway, and the original episode is available, and so is the remastered version.
Yeah.
For me though, I've kind of gotten used to the new remaster versions because I really do like those cleaned up effects. But I understand your point from last time when we discussed it, that they look too good, that the effects look too good.
Yeah, they don't. And it's like it seems like they kind of degrade them a little bit to try to make them fit in, but they still don't fit in. Especially because I remember what the effects looked like. They were very kind of cheesy effects. They
were cheesy, but I
mean,
guess
they were good for the time.
They were
for
revolutionary.
The time they're okay. I mean, they kind of it was weird. It's weird how like the effects kind of fit in with the somewhat limited budget look of the show. Like
the kind of limited. Yeah, it is. This was when the show first started. NBC gave them a very big budget, but then they cut it halfway through the season. I think they cut the budget down by. I think the budget might have been $200,000 per episode.
A lot of money for the time.
But then after the Menagerie episodes, they cut the budget down to $175,000. So this was Star Trek when they had the money. Even though they always complained they needed more money, but this was the most money they were given to spend at this time.
I mean, there are parts when, and we'll get to like when stuff explodes and parts of ships fall and they have to move pieces, and it's like obviously styrofoam, and they're trying to sort of go, and it's like obviously it's just a piece of styrofoam. You don't have to.
Yes. Now I have the press release for you if you want to read it.
The USS Enterprise embarks on a fateful seek-and-destroy mission following a series of unprovoked attacks by the marauding flagship of enemy power, Balance of Terror. Oh. On NBC Television Network's colorcast of Star Trek, William Shatner, douche, and Leonard Nimoy, nice guy, co-star, Captain Kirk, Shatner, engages in a hostile spacecraft in a furious mid-space battle. but is forced to take quarter when the equally powerful enemy, although suffering serious losses itself, inflicts heavy damage and injuries on the Enterprise, with most of their power and weaponry gone. Kirk and his wily adversary become locked in a suspenseful battle of wits as they maneuver for advantage. Mark Leonard portrays the commander of the enemy craft.
That's very good, and you made it sound really dirty.
Well, I mean, come on.
Yes. Hello.
Oh.
Mark Leonard, yes. Mark Leonard plays a Romulan in this, and then, of course, he winds up becoming Spock's dad later on.
Yeah, and I do wonder, like, how much older was he than Leonard Nimoy? Was he maybe even younger, or they're around the same age? They seem around the same age. Like, he's probably, his late 30s in this?
Well, let me take a quick peek on the Googles, and we'll find out. I've always wanted to know that myself. So I'll try Mark Leonard. He's no longer with us, is he?
No.
Yeah, okay. He was born in 1924, October 15th. He's a Libra. How about that? 1924.
So he would have been older then, I think.
Well, let's see. Let's check Lenny Nimoy.
I think he was like 31. I think Nimoy is actually like just a little
31.
older.
31.
He was like just a little older than Shatner. They were like around the same age.
That's right. Actually, yesterday was Nimoy's birthday.
There you go.
And yes, so
He
that
was a
would
little
make
bit older.
that would make Nimoy how many? 24. Geez, I'm really bad at math. 7 years.
7 years. So it's fudgeable. It's acceptable. You know.
Well, it's acceptable. They get. I don't know. Mark Leonard has a I don't know, more mature look than Nimoy. He has the gray, which distinguishes him. He kind of looks older.
Yeah,
and
it's enough. It's close enough.
It's sort of like, do you remember the movie The Manchurian Candidate, the original?
Yeah, with
Lawrence Harvey is the son of Angela Lansbury, and she isn't even. I'm not even sure.
Younger. I think she's like a year younger than him.
She just has one of these faces that looks like.
She just had that face. Yeah, it was like a face and an attitude.
She's matronly.
Yeah.
and she's evil too. She's a wicked, horrible bitch in that movie.
Great movie, by the way.
Great movie. One of my favorites. Have it on Laserdisc, actually, and starring the very beautiful Leslie Parrish, who was in an episode of Star Trek later on.
Oh.
And also, actually, there's a whole bunch of people in this movie that were in Star Trek episodes, like James Gregory and I want to say Jay Anderson, people like that. So we have a 5-star episode of the original Star Trek series.
I would agree. In fact, the thing that reminded me, this reminded me of Wrath of Khan.
Yeah, in a way, because he
was Battle of Wits. They're viewing each other on the screen. Neither one will give up. They're each trying to sort of outthink each other, and then weird stuff happens. And
it's similar to Star Trek 2 because we have a situation where both captains of their vessels are flying blind, and they really don't know where each other
Did they really explain why, as the Romulans, because they basically explained that the Romulans, because they kind of introduced the Romulans as a concept. They say there was a war 100 years ago.
50, maybe 100. I would say probably
They said
50.
100. They said 100 years ago.
Did they say, because Paul Comey, who plays Styles, he's like angry and racist with regard to like Romulans, and several members of his family died during the war.
Yeah, I know. It seems weird, but I swear.
That's like being mad at a lot of my family, maybe some of yours as well, served in World War II, and they were fighting Nazis, right? Wouldn't that be like being mad at all Germans right now?
Well, there's still a lot of people like that.
Well, there are, but he's young. He's not like if this was a long ago war, he wouldn't be. Would he really harbor that kind of hostility even now?
The South. I mean, we have the South, and they still pissed off that they lost.
Okay.
But I'm like,
Well, I said here in my notes that maybe the feelings can be compared to those of the older generation that's still alive who served in World War II.
Yeah.
But again, Comey's
character. A lot to be angry about because we're a bunch of whiny people. So. But
we're living in an age of philosophy. That's what
they said that there was they showed the space age view screen of a drawing of the neutral zone, and
it was wonderful. Yeah, it looked like my daughter. It looked like my daughter made that thing.
Kind of reminded me of that thing they did in Star Trek 6 when they computer enhancement, and it's like a drawing. But so they show what the neutral zone is. They explain what it is, and that actually because I never really knew exactly what the neutral zone was. I knew it was like something you couldn't. But this helped me understand the neutral zone is a thing. It's
but isn't there a neutral zone with regard to the Klingons too?
I thought that too, so I was a little confused about
Remember
that.
the whole Kobayashi Maru test that Kirstie Alley takes at the beginning of Star Trek 2?
Perhaps the neutral zone. Maybe there's some sort of like Star Trek super nerdy map that shows the neutral zone and how it kind of goes around and goes through, like it goes.
Yeah, that's another thing. How do you
Klingon.
map space in a three-dimensional way when the map is kind of one-dimensional? Can you go around or below or above the neutral zone?
I don't know. But they explain that like this captain, the Romulan captain, is intentionally going on the Earth side of the neutral zone.
Yeah.
But he's not under specific orders. He's like doing it on his own, isn't he?
No. He is following orders because of this new cloaking device that they have, and they want to test it, right?
They want to test it, and they're attacking all the little like things on asteroids that they've set up around the neutral zone, the Earth, the
these outposts,
and they're slowly like attacking them, and then that's why they shut them down.
Remember that horrible bit where Kirk is trying to talk to the commander,
the guy, and like there's a fire and an explosion.
He's like, "This is Commander Hansen. Do you read me, Enterprise? Do you read me? They're firing something!" Ah! And they show this whole. He says, "Can we see?" And they put on the visual, and this guy's like in a room full of fire. Yeah. He's all messed up and dying.
Yeah, and they do, and then that blows up, and then. Now they are there just surveying, right? Like, are they there to investigate why they aren't getting communications or something like that? Did they explain that? Maybe I forgot.
Well, they're patrolling along the edge of the neutral zone because of these attacks.
When it's happening. They're not,
which is not a good time to do it, considering that we like begin the episode with a wedding.
I knew something bad was gonna. As soon as I saw that, I'm like, something bad's gonna happen. That's not.
Yeah, one of them is gonna die. It's not gonna be the woman.
I thought it was both. I thought it was gonna be both at least.
Oh, that would have been awesome if they had like somehow we're holding hands in a fiery room and they're dying or something like that. But so. Everybody is on edge. They're all tense. Spock fills us in on the story of the Romulans. And then the rest, Styles and the rest of the bridge crew get to see a Romulan for the first time ever, thanks to Spock. And then everybody starts looking at Spock like
they're looking like him, like, yeah. And I don't think Spock kind of explains it like he didn't know.
He didn't know, but I think he suspected.
Yeah.
Which is funny. I mean, like, they all look at him. And it's like the mentality of prejudice or whatever. But Nimoy has a very good look on his face. He's like, yeah, I guess he looks like me.
Well, I mean, but I was thinking, like, how could there have been an Earth-Romulan conflict that seemed to have been settled through sort of passive-aggressive tweets back and forth so that they set it up? Like, okay, but I'm like, how could they have dealt
Whatever
with
happened, the Romulans probably started that.
Yeah,
the Vulcans don't answer. They only answer if they're provoked.
Yeah, but... How could there have been a conflict between them and Earth, but not them and the Vulcans? Because if they're kind of related to them, I would think that they would have been closer in space.
What I think happened, I mean, they had there was an episode of Next Generation, right? Involving Spock's character, which was kind of like a plug for Star Trek 6. And I think what happened was you had the Vulcans. Romulans were part of Vulcan or something, and I guess they didn't want to give up their emotions or anything like that, so they left.
They're almost like sort of Klingon Vulcans, Yeah. They're like more passionate, violent, although probably not as violent as Klingons, but they're more. Although when I think of like a passionate Vulcan, I'm thinking like full on crazy. Like that's the reason that they embraced logic.
Well, like Cybok or something?
Yeah.
What is Cybok? Does Cybok make
like
sense?
A hippie. Cybok was a hippie. He wasn't fully It didn't see. When I imagine like a passionate, like the reason that they embraced the logic was because they were just these crazy, bipolar, crazy people. And that's why they did that. Whereas
I kind of view them just as like Vulcans that behave like us. That's sort of how I saw it.
Well, we agree to disagree on that one.
Okay. Well, Styles, he gets angrier, and he's a very interesting character. Kirk tries to put his anger into perspective by first he ignores him, and then he tells him to ignore his feelings. So Kirk actually gets angry at Styles' anger which is interesting. He gets pissed off at him for getting pissed off.
Well, I gotta say, I kind of got pissed off at Shatner's hair in this. I mean, this might be
Shatner's hair.
This might be a recurring theme of me complaining about his hair.
Okay.
Because, like, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not, and sometimes it's lit weird and sometimes it's not. And this one, like, there are parts of it where it seems like it's still kind of his hair a little bit with a fill-in piece, and then there are other times when the piece kind of like shifts forward, and then we'll get in another episode, we'll get to like how I think like his hair is. They just kind of gave up on his hair. Like by the third season, it seemed like they kind of gave up on his hair a little bit. I thought.
Well, yeah, what you remember, we were talking about Daniel Craig and Sean Connery before.
Yeah.
And there's like this widow's peak, this very small little widow's peak that's on there. That I think is part of the piece, I guess, that Shatner had, because I don't think he actually has that. I don't think that's his natural part.
No. In fact, his hair has gotten, I would say the last 20 years, his hair has been great.
It's round. I mean, I think it's what it's naturally supposed to look like is round.
But who knows what it originally looked like? He probably started losing his hair in his 20s, and you know.
Maybe, yeah. So we go back and forth, and I think what really works about this episode, it's unfortunate too, because there was some really good writing early on the show, where I felt the emphasis was on the burden of Captain Kirk, and then you kind of see we go to this Romulan commander, played by Mark Lenard, and he is like a mirror image of Captain Kirk.
Yeah, I feel like he was doing it because he was following orders, but he didn't seem conflicted about those orders either. Like, he wasn't like, we're doing this even though we know it's wrong, because they didn't think it was wrong.
I don't know. He seemed really.
Well, it was like he gained.
He seemed really disillusioned by war, and he didn't.
Well,
like
it was
the
more
idea
like
of all
he
these...
got that he had respect for whoever the commander was, because he didn't really communicate with him or know he was named Kirk, but he was like, you know, he will do this. He's doing this. You know,
yeah, they both play
him.
this. They both play this game where they're like, "What is he going to do next? What's his next move?"
Well,
this is what I would do if I were him.
And then you have the last bit where he, like, Spock actually makes a mistake. Like he's fiddling around on the thing trying to fix something, and then he puts his hand up and he pushes a button, and then that alerts them where he is. And then first Kirk is like, "Oh no!" and then he's like, "Wait a minute, I can use this." And then they did.
That's right. Yeah. Now I wanted to get into some of my observations about the episode.
Yeah.
Now it's for me, it's hard to hate Paul Comey's character, even though he's like telegraphed. He's obviously telegraphed to be the real bad guy, not the Romulan commander. The bad guy of the piece is racism. The message is clear. It's persecution and prejudice are the real enemies, not ideological differences.
Recurring themes up until, Star Trek 6, let them die.
Yeah, let them die. Or planetary boundary. It's a great message, but it doesn't erase Styles' feelings. He has. I mean, the thing about racism and all that, you have every right to feel the way you feel. And you can't erase someone's heart. You can't erase their conscience. You can't erase how they feel. So they're always going to feel that way until the day they decide to stop feeling that way.
Yeah.
And politicians have long complained about that, because we've kind of gone into like a new age where we're policing each other, and now we have these safe spaces, and we have trigger warnings and things like that.
Yeah.
So people are policing each other, and they're making...
and people are policing themselves because they don't want any trouble.
Yeah, that's true. One bad Twitter announcement, and you could get fired from your job.
And before you know it, you've set up a neutral zone.
Mind your own business, Mr. Spock. I'm sick of your half-breed interference. Do you hear?
So we both agree that because we started the episode with a wedding, we knew someone was going to die.
Yes.
We were pretty sure it was going to be Tomlinson, the young man, right?
I was just thinking they were both going to die, but I didn't know exactly. Because I'm like, first of all, when they bring a new actor in that I've never heard of or seen or in anything, and this applies to pretty much any show, I'm like, somebody's dying.
Well, I was thinking,
was this the beginning of the red shirt is going to die? Because he did have a red shirt, didn't he?
No, not famously the red shirt. The I think the episodes where a lot of red shirts die are like Maybe in the
when
second
they beam on a
season.
planet and things like that.
There's an episode called The Apple from season 2, where like frickin' 5 red shirts die, and they're spaced apart every 5 minutes. And then there's another one called Obsession, which I think we're going to talk about next time. I'm not sure. Where a bunch of red shirts just die from this vampire blood-sucking cloud or something. And it's like a personal thing for Kirk or something. But I was thinking, this is what I was thinking, that Styles should have been the one who died. That way his death would have had more meaning. It would have carried more emotional weight. I would have had him rescuing Spock instead of Spock rescuing Styles.
And then you could have cut that whole if you're going to do that, you could have a little bit more with him, cut that whole wedding thing out, and then had a little bit more explosions in space.
It could have, yeah.
Maybe that was the idea of like, we need more story in here, because if we have too much space and special effects, it's just going to cost us more money. So it's like, let's put some weird drama in here. We can just stuff it full of extraneous things, and we'll wrap it up somehow at the end.
Yeah,
and then that way we don't have to blow things up, and it's cheaper.
Yeah, I guess unfortunately it's kind of like hindsight, because I thought the strongest performance in the piece was Styles, the actor who plays him, Paul Comey. I thought he was, because he really understands this, and that's a great thing about actors who get it, who understand. He's supposed to be angry, and he screams at Sulu. Actually, I think Sulu suggests that they should just get the hell out of there and warn Starfleet and do all this, and he says, "You don't understand. These are Romulans. If you run away, you guarantee a war." You know? Mm-hmm. And Sulu was, of course, ooh.
Oh. Oh, my.
Obviously, their weaponry is superior to ours, and they have a practical invisibility screen.
You're discussing tactics. Do you realize what this really comes down to? Millions and millions of lives hanging on what this vessel does next.
Or on what this vessel fails to do, Doctor.
Yes, well, gentlemen, the question still remains. Can we engage them with a reasonable possibility of victory?
No question. Their power is simple impulse.
Meaning we cannot run them?
To be used in chasing them or retreating?
Sir. Go ahead, Mr. Stiles. I call this session for opinions.
We have to attack immediately.
Explain.
They're still on our side of the neutral zone. There would be no doubt that they broke the treaty.
Attack without a visible target. How do we aim our phasers?
Aim with sensors. Not accurate, but if we blanket them, we can...
I know it's for a lucky shot before they zero in on us.
And if we don't? Once back, they'll report that we saw their weapons and ran.
And if they could report that they destroyed us?
These are Romulans. You run away from them and you guarantee war. They'll be back, not just one ship, but with everything they've got. You know that, Mr. Science Officer. You're the expert in these people, but you've always left out that one point. Why? I'm very interested in why.
So what's interesting is McCoy is often the guy in the group to bust on Spock, and it's interesting to see him, being not only the adult, but he's like an elder statesman. He's providing psychological guidance to Kirk when he needs it, and occasionally McCoy will be a sounding board for Kirk and Spock. McCoy wants no war. He doesn't want anyone to get hurt.
Well, yeah, and also, again, this is like this new threat that nobody even knew was there.
And it's frightening. It's frightening.
And they never knew their face. And then it's this whole sort of weird conflict with Spock. Like somehow it's his, like he should be responsible for these people that he doesn't really know anything about. I mean,
yeah. Even though we know, like, practically, he should not be responsible for that at all.
No.
Luckily, I mean, like, that's why it's what's great about, at least Kirk and McCoy will defend Spock, and everyone else will too, except for Styles. Styles is the only guy; he's the odd man out. He hates Spock until Spock, of course, saves his life.
Yeah. With this weird, convenient gas leak thing, or was it a gas?
I don't know what it was. It was phasers. It
was like the chamber, and it flooded with some sort of gas and everything. And I'm like,
well, the whole thing has like a submarine vibe to it.
I think they were talking about like radiation or something. I'm like, when some sort of radioactive gas comes in, you breathe it out.
There's some kind of pretty bluish pink coolant fluid.
I don't think you come back from that. Although I could be wrong. I think they're like you can take pills because they did that in.
Doesn't it seem wildly impractical though to have you're supposed to be firing phasers. You should fire phasers up where you are, not having a crew down there to do it for you. But they're trying to do this sea battle with submarines type thing because of the cloaking device,
Oh yeah.
It's like submarines hiding under the surface of the water.
That was the thing I noticed of like I didn't know that, like, kind of spoiler alert, but at the end, like, they actually used the cloaking device on the ship. Or am I thinking? No. I'm thinking of
You think of the Enterprise incident?
I'm thinking of the Enterprise incident. I'm sorry.
Well, I think they take it a little too far. The writer, Paul Schneider, is good script, but they take it a little too far when everyone's whispering so that the Romulans can't hear. As far as I know, sound doesn't travel through the vacuum of space.
No, that's true. But for dramatic effect.
So, yeah, it's for dramatic effect. It's for suspense. So, Star Trek was distinctive for science fiction entertainment at the time because the production actually retained the services of technical advisors. They had people from RAND Corporation, DeForest Research, and Jet Propulsion Laboratories. So they were all the treatments and the outlines and the scripts were all heavily scrutinized before shooting. So I'm sure somebody said, hey, wait a minute, why are they whispering? This is kind of dumb.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you don't get it. It's a submarine. Get it? It's a submarine movie. Oh, right. But I do also enjoy that we see the enemy, and we see that the enemy is very much like us.
Captain. Standing by to beam your survivors aboard our ship. Prepare to abandon your vessel.
No, it's not our way. I regret that we meet in this way. You and I are of a kind. In a different reality. I could have called you friend.
The Romulan commander, Mark Lenard, has an old man that they call the Centurion. And he's talking to him, and he's bouncing ideas off of him, and they confide in each other. The Centurion gets crushed by a piece of styrofoam shit.
Yeah, it comes, and they all are like really struggling. I'm like, I can tell it's a piece of, because I think when it falls, it kind of bounces a little, bang, and then they're like,
probably. I mean, like you don't want to drop a heavy piece of metal on an actor and possibly kill him. Then you have to call his wife. Sorry, your husband died.
Yeah.
While we were shooting an episode of a television show. Yeah. So Tomlinson, the young man who was going to get married, winds up being the one who dies. They in this cat and mouse game, Kirk is anticipated where he thinks the Romulans are going to show up, and he kind of baits them a little bit by making it look like they're injured, and then the Romulan ship decloaks, and he goes and he says fire, 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 and no one's firing because there's a coolant leak. Spock goes in there. He rescues Styles, but he just leaves Tomlinson for dead, which is kind of messed up.
And again, it kind of goes back to Star Trek 2 a little bit, because that's it's at least half of what Spock did, when he went into the radiation-filled. Maybe that was why he was able to, because that was why he was able to do that in Star Trek 2 and just go in there and not die immediately, was because his Vulcan anatomy now allows him to not die in a radioactive thing, at least not immediately, I guess.
Well, also, Spock does make some stupid decisions once in a while, especially on the TV show, in the movies and stuff like that. He'll do some stupid things, and I think that's the human half coming out.
It's the human half, yeah. I don't know, if he was full Vulcan, he probably wouldn't have been pushed
like that Apple
button.
episode, the Apple episode I mentioned to you about the red shirts. There's a scene where he actually pushes Kirk out of the way and takes a bunch of horrible poisonous thorns himself. And Kirk is even like, next time just tell me to move. I can step out of the way as quickly as the next man. So we get to the end. Only one casualty, and that's Tomlinson. Mm-hmm. And the final scene in the episode has Tomlinson's widow, though she's not really a widow. They were never officially married. She's waiting in the chapel because apparently she's a masochist.
Yeah.
Kirk enters.
He enters, and it's like he's like full. He's almost like Shatner. Shatner arrives like you just see him in like a silhouette of.
He's in a silhouette. He's a tough guy. He's a
right.
tough cookie, but he's there for her. He says, "You see this shoulder, honey? Anytime. It's here
That's
for you."
right. That's right. I'll show you my quarters, and
but she is strong.
Yeah.
He says to her, it never makes any sense, but you have to know there was a reason. And she just hugs him and looks at him and says she'll be okay.
Yeah.
And then she appears later in the episode Shore Leave, romancing another guy. And I think
how many episodes after that is that?
It was this is so unfortunate. It was aired right after this episode.
Oh, wow. See, like, the thing is, people deal with grief. I can almost see that of, like, that's an extreme situation. You can see somebody just going complete, slutty.
In production order, this was shot maybe 6 or 7 episodes after Balance of Terror, but for some reason, NBC decided to air it right after this one.
No, they don't care.
Which makes it look like this chick is just on the make.
Coin a phrase. Fascinating.
Well, she is. Everybody deals with grief differently. I mean, people slut it up all the time to deal with all kinds of stresses, so it almost makes sense, but I'm sure that wasn't intentional.
Well, I'm hoping that Tomlinson's ghost is haunting her.
Yeah. Now, I think it's in this episode where, through this whole thing where they're just about to die, or maybe I'm thinking of the other episode where Rand is always up in Kirk's grill and trying to touch on him and. Well,
Yeoman Rand. Janice is in this episode. Yeah,
it's in this one. Yeah, okay. So yeah, she's like, they seem to always almost be dying in this episode. She's always just sort of getting near him.
Oh yeah, isn't it? Okay, yeah, isn't there a shot there where the Romulans fire their plasma weapon and she freaks out and he hugs her and he's hugging her as this plasma thing is coming toward them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's a little unusual. Where No Man Has Gone Before, the pilot episode with you remember Gary Mitchell?
Yeah.
He holds a yeoman's hand or something when they're going through the barrier. It's weird. I mean, it's like, yeah, we can put these women in this situation, but even though they're in this incredibly dangerous job in Starfleet, we got to hug them and hold their hands.
Well, if you've ever dealt with women, you gotta sometimes, you just gotta do that,
Actually, most of the time, I'm frightened out of my wits, and my wife has to hug me. That's usually how that works. Or my daughter, I'm like, Regan, come over here and hug Daddy.
Yeah. I'll make sure if we're ever like on a dying spacecraft, I guess I'll have to take over then out of necessity, I guess.
So.
You are now listening to Ship, a Star Trek podcast, with David Lawler and David B. Anderson. Boldly podcasting, where no podcast has... I'm not reading this. I'm not. Where's my coat? I'm getting out of here. I hate it here.
Any more observations about Balance of Terror?
Yes. Good. Actually, a really good one, because we watched those first two, and while they were good, they weren't the best example of the show. And I'd say this is like probably in that upper, I'd say 10% of the shows. It's a really good, like I said, it reminded me of Wrath of Khan, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it thoroughly, and I liked it, and I think it's like if you want to show somebody like a good example, it's still got some of the cheese, because you can't not have the cheese just with Shatner there.
Of course, well, yeah. But it's entertaining cheese. It's worth it. This cheese is worth it. We see a lot of cheesy stuff in 2017, but it's really kind of cringy kind of stuff. But this, you're more forgiving of something like this because it was made, how many years ago now? 50? It's like 50 years. 50
years, yeah. And there was another thing I kind of like.
It's really not bad for 50 years ago.
When I watched this, I was like, this episode, this is 66. 67 probably by now.
Yeah, well, I think it was shot and aired in 1966.
Okay, this is probably just a little over 10 years removed from Star Wars.
Yeah,
this couldn't, as far as science fiction goes, this couldn't be any further from Star Wars. This is like what people thought Star Wars could end up being with something like this. Now, Star Trek is great, and
Star Wars is very similar though in the way it handles battle in space.
Yes,
it's always about firing lasers and blowing shit up, even though that really doesn't happen. in science.
Despite George Lucas's many filmmaking issues that he has and continues to have, that is a much. It just looks better. It's better.
Yeah, it doesn't even matter if it's not accurate.
Yeah.
It just looks good. It looks great.
Yeah,
one of my favorite bits in Star Wars is right after they escape the Death Star and Luke and Han get into those turrets in the Millennium Falcon and they have that battle with the TIE fighters. It's freaking awesome. That's like one of my favorite things.
It's like there's a even though it's complete fantasy and everything, there's a reality to it. Whereas you're kind of removed from reality when watching something like this. It's a combination of Star Trek is a fantastical show, and just time, like the silliness of it doesn't necessarily age well, and just the cheese factor, like you said, there's a cheese factor, but yet the storytelling and the science fiction, you can tell what they're trying to do. Like, say, compare this to something like A Next Generation. That's much better, fully realized version of the concept of the show.
Yeah.
But some could argue that this is still more entertaining because it's a different kind of show, and
also better handled. Even looking at the Blu-rays of Next Generation, they remastered the visual effects for those too. But that remastering looks a lot better.
Well, yeah, it's because the reason that is because
it's more photorealistic, right?
Yeah, the reason it looked, because it always looked kind of strange when they showed it on TV, because what they did was everything was shot on film, including all the special effects, but it would be edited together in video. In video. So it looked.
That's why it took forever for the show to come out on Blu-ray, because they had to go back to the original negatives.
Back to the original film elements and then redid them, and I think they edited them digitally, and then they could do it, and then there wasn't this weird sort of somewhat video look to the special effects, even though it wasn't shot on video. It was actually shot on film, but it just the way they edited it.
Because it was quicker once they figured out that they could have higher resolution video. They had nonlinear avids cutting those episodes and then putting them onto broadcast standard tapes and sending them off to the syndicators.
They could just get it done quick,
Yeah, they could do it really quickly. Whereas with Star Trek, it would take months.
Well, or I mean, it was like you could either have Star Trek where some of the effects were funky, but they were there, or you could do something like a Battlestar Galactica, where they just reuse the same, like really good effects, but they just reuse them over and over again. And you kind of like have those options of like, I'd rather have somewhat funky special effects that are consistent.
For Balance of Terror, and I think for Enterprise Incident, the remastered visual effects look pretty good. And I do see what you're talking about, how they try to kind of dirty it up a little bit, but I like what they did with because the Romulan ship and the visual effects in the original episode, not that great.
Yeah, in fact, it seems like they're kind of going for the spirit of the special effects, because there are parts where, like, they're just sort of shooting at nothing. It's kind of when they're shooting at the ship, shooting at the Romulan ship, trying to blow it up, and then you just see, you don't see the ship, you don't see anything. So it's like they're trying to do, because that's probably why they did it on the show of like, well, we can't afford to put all these different elements in, so we'll just like have a hint of this and a hint of that. So they just did like a cleaner version of the hint of whatever.
Plus they kind of make a big mistake in the script. They keep saying fire phasers, but if you look at the effect, it actually looks more like photon torpedoes. Because phasers are supposed to be...
Phasers, they kind of
like
go...
That.
Yeah, you're right.
Whereas the photon torpedoes, like...
They go... Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't correct that. That's interesting.
I think at the time, everybody was... You got to understand the time that this was broadcast. This was blowing people's minds.
Yeah, it was.
And then, of course, they'd see 2001, and that was... I mean, that kind of goes back to the Star Wars of... Like, 2000... The special effects of 2001, they're, like, on that level of, like, the Star Wars special effects, where it's like, people went from Star Trek to 2001, like, literally within, like, 2 years, and they were seeing something like that. Of course, it blew everybody's mind.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on this?
My thought... Oh, this is like Star Trek at its best. They had unprecedented freedom to do whatever they wanted to do within the first maybe 9 or 10 episodes. This was when Gene Roddenberry was producing the show, and he would shortly after bump himself upstairs to executive producer, and he would have Gene Kuhn come in to produce. Roddenberry was having constant fights with NBC, and they didn't like him. And when Gene Kuhn came in, they had a better relationship, because at least Roddenberry wasn't bugging them so much. So this was like the prime of the show. It was kind of downhill from here, because they when the network cut their budget, that just made it worse for them. And but they did have to be more creative. And luckily, they had some great producers who came in and were very good with, pinching pennies and figuring out how to save money. This is this is still the Captain Kirk that Roddenberry wanted. This was a Captain Kirk who acted more like a captain and less like a guy banging, alien chicks or whatever else.
Which he would later become.
Yeah, he all the characters sort of steeped into some kind of a stereotype. McCoy got crankier. Spock got more analytical.
See, that was the thing. People loved their Spock. Like, he was always the most popular part of the show because they watched for Spock of like this weird logical guy that was like internally.
And this is the kind of stuff my wife liked, because she was always my wife, not like, she's like a casual Star Trek fan. She only watched it because I watched it, right? But the Kirk she remembered was always the one who was seducing women and being charming and all that stuff. But she watched episodes like these and was like, This is a Captain Kirk I really like. He's doing his job. He's no nonsense.
Yeah.
And that's what he should. He's very. If you look at Captain Kirk in these early episodes, he's very much like Jean-Luc Picard. Jean-Luc Picard is what Gene Roddenberry wanted in a starship captain.
He would think things through. He would have a mission. He would be trying to do a specific thing. Although that kind of gets into.
And also, I mean, there's an early scene where they're having a briefing. It's very much like in Next Generation, where Picard always gathers the senior officers together and they talk about the problem, and then he figures out what to do.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and it kind of goes to like in the next episode.
The next episode is this is a different Star Trek. Yes.
You don't know what Kirk's deal is, at least at the beginning.
Yeah, yeah. I have some problems. It's a good episode, but I have a lot of problems with.
I have problems with his hair.
You always have problems with his hair, man.
Yeah, I do.
So there would only be 2 episodes featuring Romulans in the 3-year run of Star Trek. We move forward to the 3rd season, episode 59.
There aren't any more?
We only hear about Romulans.
Wow.
And we see some stock footage of their ships, but we never see them again until.
Do you think maybe the Klingons kind of took over for that? And
yeah, because the Romulans are expensive. I mean, they're they got the ears and everything and the makeup. The Klingons, all you did was put brown paint on them and a fake.
I just realized I've been talking about like expensive. I just realized like it kind of goes to at the end of the episode when some ships show up, and they look like Klingon ships. And then they just kind of quietly, I think Spock says, yes, they have embraced Klingon technology or something like that. Their warships use Klingon technology. I'm wondering if that was an attempt to just, we have these ships, we don't, like, we only have one Romulan ship, but we have these Klingon ships. Because you see one Romulan ship, and then you see a couple of Klingon ships, and I just realized.
And that's not actually the one you watched is not how the original episode went. The original episode was a bunch of Klingon ships. No Romulan ships whatsoever.
No Romulan ships.
Yeah. So what happened was
just not even have the Romulan ship, and they're like, well, but we have these Klingon ships. We'll just say it in a line. We'll say they use the same technology, and then that way.
Yeah. Intelligence. He says intelligence reports Romulans now using Klingon design. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
That's kind of a cheap way to get out of it. But okay. This episode is written by Dorothy Fontana. And if you believe her side of the story, her script was destroyed by Fred Freiberger and Arthur Singer, the producer and story consultant for season 3. The Romulans would receive offhanded mentions, but never been given decent treatment except for these 2 episodes. And the Klingons, of course, pop up more because their makeup is cheaper to apply. Now I'm going to send you the press release for this one. And if you could read it in the form of Dr. William H. Cosby, Ph.D.
Captain Kirk, William Shatner, disguises himself as Vulcan Romulan in an attempt to free the USS Enterprise, which is being held captive by Mr. Spock, Leonard Nimoy, in prisoner to the chimes of a female Romulan commander on NBC television network's Star Trek. In color. And Jello. Romulan ships to surround the Enterprise. I'm sorry. I messed up. Friday, September 27th, in the Enterprise incident, an invisible shield enables Romulan ships to surround Enterprise without detection. Guest star Joanne Linville has the role of beautiful Romulan commander who entices Spock to take command of the Enterprise. She should have just slipped something in his drink. I think that might have been better. Dr. McCoy, DeForest Kelly pronounces Captain Kirk dead after Spock applies the Vulcan death grip. Try that too.
And it's really cool too because they drink Tang out of these square glasses, which is pretty awesome. So you have this episode is madness. I mean, it's just complete and utter madness because
it took me a while to figure out what was going on.
And you could see this is where some of Captain Kirk's hostility for Chekhov comes out because he just starts in on Chekhov for no reason at all. He even pushes him aside. So it has suspense and a bunch of craziness that even if it's deliberate, it still makes no sense considering that the Enterprise is on like the secret mission. So DC Fontana's script defies logic. So you have Kirk going nuts or paranoid just to get it on McCoy's record. This makes no sense because it isn't necessary for Kirk to establish a mental breakdown to his crew. All McCoy has to do is draft up some notes in his log, and then we can get on with the mission, right?
Yeah, well, it starts off with McCoy. It's like the McCoy log. It's not usually the captain's log. It's like the McCoy, and Captain Kirk is acting erratic. He's having a stress meltdown or something like that.
Yeah, and I think actually this might be one of those examples of Shatner overacting. What do you think?
But it was for the purposes of this episode, it's okay, I think, because he's doing it on purpose. In fact, near the end of the episode, when he's kind of like supposed to be dead and he's like on his actual mission, he's just regular kind of medium Shatner.
Yeah, he's back to regular Shatner. I guess the idea here is that we have to pretend that Kirk is nuts so that he can take the Enterprise past the neutral zone.
So that the Federation has like they can have deniability. They can say if it goes wrong, it was a crazy captain.
Yeah. So if anything went wrong, you would be the one to blame, McCoy utters, which covers the writer's ass, basically.
Yeah.
So the mission as scripted is to steal the Romulan cloaking device, and according to the treaty drafted between the Romulans and the Federation, this would be a staggeringly illegal action, right? Justification for war. And it's reckless and irresponsible for the Federation to disavow any knowledge of Kirk and Spock's actions, right?
Yeah.
But once we get past that, we're okay with the logic at least. But the loyal Star Trek audience will be clued into the subterfuge within the first couple of minutes. Shatner's performance goes beyond over the top and descends into this ridiculous madness. What happens here? Okay, he goes nuts. What happens? We were introduced to the Romulan commander, hot chick Joanne Linville, and suddenly she's all attracted to Spock for some reason.
Because he's Vulcan, but maybe she reminds him of like a hot Romulan or something.
A hot Romulan, especially because I think around that time Leonard Nimoy was getting a lot of fan mail from women. I don't know why Spock became a sex symbol for some reason.
Because he was so different. He was so different from, and it's like he's almost a comment on repressed men when you think about it.
Yeah, I guess.
Like when you think about it, it's like.
But I think he's comfortable with his repression, though, right?
Yeah, and he is who he is. He is internal, like he's somewhat damaged, but he's like only women can heal him with their love or something.
Maybe it's this delusion that human female Star Trek fans have, that they think all Spock needs is one good woman,
one good Earth woman,
to make him break out of his shell.
Yeah,
he's had girlfriends before, but his girlfriends have never been able to get through to him.
Only when he has to mate every 7 years so he doesn't die.
Yeah, I know. He turns into a sex maniac or something, right?
Yeah.
Every 7 years, Pon farr.
Just catch him on his Pon farr, you'll be set.
It is called Pon farr. So there's the Romulan commander starts talking to Spock and almost completely ignoring Kirk, and Kirk is just like, Spock starts his performance. His performance is basically, Kirk's nuts. He is not sane, and Shatner. We cut right before the commercial break. We cut to Shatner's wild eyes, and we hear this music. Like that.
The strain of command has worn heavily upon him. He has not been himself for several weeks.
That's a lie.
As you can see, Captain Kirk is a highly sensitive and emotional person. I believe he has lost the capacity for rational decision.
Shut up, Spock.
I'm betraying no secrets. The commander's suspicion that Starfleet ordered the Enterprise into the neutral zone is unacceptable. Our rapid capture demonstrates its foolhardiness.
You filthy liar.
I am speaking the truth for the benefit of the Enterprise and the Federation. I say now, and for the record, that Captain Kirk ordered the Enterprise across the neutral zone on his own initiative and his craving for glory.
I'll kill you, Mr. Tracy. I'll kill you! I'll kill you!
He is not sane.
And he says, I'll kill you, you filthy traitor. And then they throw him into the brig. And then Kirk smashes himself up against the force field or something. And then they bring McCoy over to examine him. And he says, you know, Kirk's nuts. He's got feelings of persecution, abandonment issues or whatever else. And then Spock comes in and then applies his famous Vulcan death grip. Which, you know, helpfully Nurse Chapel informs us there's no such thing as a Vulcan death grip. How the hell does she know? There's an episode that Dorothy Fontana wrote called Journey to Babel, which has Mark Lenard as Spock's dad. And she establishes that Vulcans had a death penalty involving snapping people's necks. So why wouldn't there be such a thing as a Vulcan death grip, you know?
Maybe.
I mean, if he can knock you out just by pinching your neck or whatever, they could probably come up with a million different ways.
But he applied something to him that makes him look dead.
Yeah, I guess.
Or something like that.
Yeah, I don't quite know how that happens. I don't know how they come to the conclusion because McCoy says you're lucky they didn't start an autopsy because Kirk comes to.
Yeah.
And I guess his mission is to masquerade as a Romulan, go aboard the ship, and steal the cloaking device.
Yes.
So we get to the Romulan commander, which is the lovely Joanne Linville. It's written she's a pussycat. Or perhaps a jellyfish, the way she crumbles when Spock starts putting these moves on her that are against his character, really.
Well, he's just kind of doing the hand Vulcan. It's like the sexy Vulcan hand thing where he just sort of.
Is that their
like I am not? It's kind of like an I am not touching you kind of a thing.
Is that like Vulcan foreplay or something?
It could be, yeah.
Because she's like, and it doesn't make any sense to me because she's supposed to be a commander.
Oh, it doesn't matter. Maybe it's because he's Vulcan and she's Romulan, and it's like some sort of interesting mix where it's like forbidden love or something. I don't know.
This wouldn't feel out of place like in an episode of The Man from U.N.C.L.E., except you would have Ilya subbing for Spock in this case. But Spock, I think he behaves in a wildly illogical way, and I think that the Romulan commander would see right through that. And there's another thing I want to mention. All of these elements were present in the original early drafts. And her main complaints that she had to the producers when they rewrote her script had to do with Spock's skill with the commander and the ease with which he romances her. Nobody, she didn't really buy it. Even though all of this is kind of, it's like a weird theater that's going on. It's like all of this is fake because it's all meant just to get that cloaking device.
Yeah, and I noticed something like when they put Kirk in the Vulcan or not in the Romulan sort of makeup, which they would later do stuff like that on. I think they did it to Riker, didn't they? They make him Romulan at some point.
They made they made him okay. There was a what was it? Who Watches the Watchers? I'm kind of a nut when it comes to this stuff. What happens is
Spock's contaminating this boy, Jim.
There's this race of people that are distant relatives of Vulcans. And again, I don't know if this is like a Cybok thing or something like that, but these people are more Vulcan. They're not like particularly military. They're peaceful people, and they I think Crusher makes up Riker and Troy to look like these people. And I remember Ray Wise is in it too. He plays it, and for some reason they think Picard is God. And Picard keeps having to tell him, I'm not God, stop calling me God. But they just don't look right. I mean, and the thing about it, I don't know, Troy kind of pulls it off a little bit more, but Riker doesn't. He looks kind of goofy as a fake Vulcan. Yeah. But I was thinking that Shatner, I mean, what do you think of Shatner's makeup?
I it makes him look vaguely Asian. He's got kind of eyes thing and a thing. The thing that stuck in my head was, I'd never actually seen this episode, but I knew that image of him as the Romulan because they used it in the trailer for Star Trek VI. there's like this trailer for, maybe I'll have to send it to you, but there's a trailer for Star Trek 6 where they show like various clips from movies and TV episodes, and it's like kind of like projected onto the Enterprise. It's actually a shot.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. I saw that trailer when we went to see. I took my girlfriend at the time. I took her to see Naked Gun 2.5.
Yeah, this would have been like late 90. This would have been like mid 91 or something.
Yeah, there was a trailer. There was a trailer for Star Trek 6. And it had this kind of weird, exactly what you said.
They project. It was like they just used footage. They basically used clips from TV episodes and movies and put it on the Enterprise shot from, I think, the end of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, when they have that long shot of the Enterprise and then it goes into warp.
Yeah.
And that was, so it's like that piece of like picture I was already in my head of like, so when I saw it, I was like, I remember that. That's all I knew it from. And then of course I later I saw that trailer, and then like, you know, later in Next Generation they did that, I think, with Riker, where they made him up. So I was kind of like, oh, that must have been what they did. They just they do like a thing. It's kind of like a surgery sort of thing.
Oh, plus, you know, there was the episode that Leonard Nimoy was in where they made Data and Picard they made them up to look like Romulans.
Oh, I'll have to go back to that one. I don't remember that.
Yeah, and I don't know.
I will say I do like how the continuity, in a weird way, like in these 2009 Star Trek, they kept that continuity where he was ambassador to Romulus.
No, you broke our cardinal rule, David.
Oh, sorry.
You mentioned that movie.
Yeah, well, it does fit. It does. Well, see, but this is all stuff
there was this guy. His name is J.J. Abrams, and he said, "I'm Superboy fan of Star Wars and Star Trek, and I'm going to live a life that only you will envy," which is to direct and make Star Wars and Star Trek movies. Well, we kind of figure out what the plan is when Spock is rescued. He spends all this time romancing the Romulan commander. And we know Scotty's going to work his magic and install the cloaking device and use it against the Romulans.
And speaking of Scotty, this is like, he has different hair in the third season. He has kind of like a blow dried, slick back.
He has a slick back. He has a slick back look for the first like 7 or 8 episodes of the third season, and then
he goes back to the comb over thing.
Yeah, well, no, it's like they gray it and they give him sideburns or something like that. I don't know why they messed with his hair so much. It's weird.
They changed it. They changed it back in the movies. He had back to the same sort of old hairstyle.
Yeah, but despite these problems, this is still like a great and memorable episode. It's never boring. It's completely over the top and it's utterly unrealistic. But
could we say this is the Star Trek V of the series?
I don't know. No, that would probably be the Way to Eden. That's much later in the third season. This is actually one of the better third season episodes that were made. Still not as good as Balance of Terror, because Balance of Terror has such a great dimensional quality to it, not only with the characterizations as they were originally envisioned by Roddenberry, but also the ancillary characters have so much going for them. Whereas in this, it's mainly, you know, because they cut the budget, it became the Kirk, Spock, McCoy show more than anything else. So a lot of the other characters were just sort of pushed to the side. They did give Scotty more to do, though, in the third season. But Dorothy Fontana, being an extremely talented writer and responsible for some of the more memorable episodes of Star Trek, Tomorrow Is Yesterday, Charlie X, Friday's Child with Julie Newmar in it, Journey to Babel, the extensive rewrite of By Any Other Name that we talked about. In addition to being the show's best story supervisor and script consultant, she also had the temperament of a typical stubborn writer. She didn't mind rewriting other people's scripts, but she hated being rewritten by people that she viewed as inexperienced novices, such as the people Roddenberry brought in to handle the third season. So she clashed with Roddenberry and Robert Justman as well. But after this script was delivered and shot, she took her name off of everything else she was working on and abandoned her work and used the pseudonym Michael Richards. Not the same Michael Richards who plays Kramer. I think that name came from her two brothers, Michael and Richard. So she just combined them for the pseudonym. But otherwise, I really liked this episode. What did you think of it?
I liked it. Again, I was confused. There were a few things to it. First, it was throwing me off because as soon as it starts, Kirk is like acting erratic, and I'm like, there has to be some. I knew there had to be some reason.
Yeah.
I'm like, because this is not normal. I mean, of course he's Kirk and he does his Kirkisms, but this is not normal Kirk. This is not normal Kirk weirdness. This is weird Kirk weirdness. So I'm like, well, what's going on? And then I got distracted by his weird hair. That it was like this. It wasn't his best piece. It wasn't his best hair day, so it was kind of like frizzy and falling off kind of thing. And it was bugging me. and then I got to the story, and then I'm like, oh, okay, this is interesting. So so Kirk,
and you still have to keep wondering, why the hell is he behaving this way? Like he says, they're having a little meeting in the conference room, and McCoy says, you ordered us into the neutral zone. He says, dismissed, Doctor. He says, but Jim, he says, I said dismissed.
I said good day, sir.
He's like, what the hell is going on? But McCoy already knew about all this stuff.
I don't know. Maybe he was trying to kind of just keep it alive or something, because like they're being observed by the Romulans, I think.
Maybe, or they were just all in it, except for Scotty.
I did like kind of at the end. That kind of goes to the version I saw with the slightly better special effects. Mm-hmm. Having the slightly better special effects helped it tell the story better, especially.
They did a much better job. These visual effects make a lot more sense than the original episode.
Because the way that they showed it is like, so they use the cloaking device, and then they're like, we'll just fire at the last known coordinates,
mm-hmm.
and then they're able to move away, and like they show them like shooting at nothing.
That's right. Yeah.
And like the way that they showed it in the version I saw, the cleaned up version, it was easy to understand what was going on. I can only imagine with the limited special effects of what they had, of like what did he look like? Could you even understand what they were doing?
Yeah, they only had like for the entire show, for the 3 seasons, they only had like a handful of shots, and they couldn't really do anything more. The only other time that they did special effects specifically for an episode was, I think, the Tholian Web. Mm-hmm. And those were really fantastic. And actually, that was the only time Star Trek ever won an Emmy, was for that show. But we'll get to that when we get to that.
I mean, it's such a contrast to the quality of the special effects that they would have later in the films, especially in that first film,
mm-hmm.
which almost wasn't. I mean, because they did a bunch of special effects on the first movie and then had to scrap them because they were so bad, and then had to go back, and then they got actually quality people, and then they did like arguably still probably the best special effects of any of the films is the first film, I think.
Yeah, that, and also I think the Nebula sequence in Star Trek 2 was fantastic as well.
But I mean, there's stuff in Star Trek 2 where
the explosion of the Genesis planet.
Genesis planet, yeah. I mean, but they even reused some of the special effects from the first Star Trek movie, like when they show up at the Enterprise.
Yeah,
it's like all just reused stuff, and they just put different music on it, and somehow you buy it.
Yeah,
it took a few viewings before I even noticed it. Like,
they had to. Reused. Yeah, when they did Star Trek 2, they had to recycle.
A much lower budget.
Yeah, it was a much lower budget, so you saw a lot of duplicates of shots from that first movie. But a lot of those Enterprise flybys are fantastic.
Yeah.
So they figured, hey, we spent $40 million on these effects.
Yeah. They spent like half of that was just development, like, oh, we're gonna do a new series. No, we're gonna do a movie. No, we're gonna do a series. No, we're gonna do a miniseries. No, we're gonna do a movie. And then they find like we're gonna do a movie. So it's like all this money goes into that, and then they do those special effects that they have to scrap, and then that costs money. And then there's like Shatner's hair. That's expensive. So
I am tired. Let's get the hell out of here.
All right. Well, let's wrap this one up. This has been Ship to Ship, a Star Trek podcast with David Lawler and David B. Anderson. Join us next time where we'll be discussing... I'm not really sure. What are we discussing?
I don't know. It's your show.
Where's... Okay. Let me see if I... Oh, okay. The next episode will be Kirk's Private Little Wars, The Conscience of the King and Obsession, from season 1 and 2.
I look forward to that.
All right. So we'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
You have been listening to Ship, a Star Trek podcast, with your hosts, David Lawler and David B. Anderson. To find out more about us, subscribe to our YouTube channel or visit us at www.blissville.net or on Facebook at Misadventures in Blissville. Good night.